Welcome back, everybody. It's Leslie again with another installment of our monthly, bi-monthly, whenever I feel like doing one, series of interviewing interesting people or people that should be of interest to you in the professional beauty industry. Today, we have with us somebody who you may not think has a significant anything to offer of significance to the professional beauty industry. You may not have even thought about this. Maybe you have, but I want to reintroduce this idea to you. And today we have with us Mike Carney from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So most of you have probably heard of a Chamber of Commerce in your neighborhood. Mike is going to talk to us about what that means to a stylist, a nail tech, a barber, whoever you are. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks a lot, Leslie. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the basics. If somebody, if we have a new stylist or barber online that is perhaps not familiar with how a Chamber of Commerce would interact with their business, or maybe someone who's owned a business for many, many years, how does the Chamber of Commerce, what are the services you have that benefit somebody in that situation?
So just about every town in America has a local Chamber of Commerce. And they play a critical role because they're a convener of businesses. And then, what they tend to do at the local level is help ensure that the business community's voice is heard when it comes to the activities of local government. They're typically, made up of community leaders. So they're involved in everything from planning to Board of Education. And then every state has its own Chamber of Commerce as well. And they're more involved in policy making at the state level. And then where we are in Washington is the United States Chamber of Commerce. And I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which is a nonprofit affiliate of the Chamber. What the U.S. Chamber of Commerce does is it takes all the voices from local chambers and state chambers and businesses of all sizes, from very small to very large, and gives them a voice in Washington. It was established more than 100 years ago. President Taft actually called on the business community to create a unified voice in Washington because at that time, there was no voice for business. So we are based before and after pandemic in a building across the street from the White House. It used to be Daniel Webster's house. And we do a lot, both in Washington and around the country, is intended to both ensure that businesses have their voice heard, but also to educate businesses about how government impacts them, how they can make use of kind of collaboration across industries. And then, also just ensuring that the folks in Washington and the state capitals know what the business community needs to be successsul. Over the past 245 years, our democracy and our economy have developed in tandem. And they're really interwoven. So it's just as important that we have a good, vibrant economy as it is that we have a good, vibrant democracy.
So I love this concept, the way you're laying it out. And I'm trying to make an analogy that I think people who maybe can grasp a little bit easier in terms of what it's like for them. So we all know how, and this may be a poor analogy, just tell me if it is. But we all know how unions work, for example, that a union represents, let's say, the pipe fitters, right? And if they are representing all the individual pipe fitters, when they go into contract negotiations, they're taking all those voices and aggregating it in one place. You aren't representing one single business. You're taking all those small voices and going to a bigger platform to try to, because my analogy comes off of having seen during COVID a ton of information about the PPP coming from the Chamber of Commerce, right? I followed them and they kept sending stuff out about how to get your payroll protection, right? Payments. So is that a kind of a good analogy? It's sort of aggregating so even if you are a sole stylist in a solo salon, you only work with yourself, you only work for yourself, you are that small of a business, your voice can still be heard both at your local, state, and federal level by participating. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I think there's more than 300 issues that are being covered. So everything from taxes to employment to health to sustainability to energy, there's a whole range of issues that are covered. Then in the Chamber Foundation, what we do is much broader, and it's focused on educating the public about how business does well, how business does good, and how it prepares for the future. And it's the combination of all of these activities that you've seen during the pandemic. PPP is a really good example. So we helped millions of businesses, many, many small businesses deal with the initial economic and health crisis at the beginning of the pandemic. So in April and May, it seemed like we weren't doing anything other than briefing people on PPP. But that was the visible part of it. What happened before that was the chamber and other business groups were deeply engaged with policymakers in Washington about the need for a program like PPP. It didn't just come out of thin air. And there's rarely an issue where the business community, organized labor, and other groups are not engaging with policymakers on Capitol Hill, at the White House, or in state capitals, or in the mayor's office, talking about how these policies will help or hinder their constituencies.
So before we get away from sort of the bigger picture, what if I am that person and I want to get involved? I want to have my voice heard. I have some great ideas about what my business might need to flourish. What's the easiest way for me to get involved with my Chamber of Commerce?
So I would say go to Google. I don't get paid by Google, but they are the go-to place.
Yeah.
Type in the name of your town and Chamber of Commerce, and then contact the people on the website that comes up, because their job is to help ensure that the local businesses are flourishing. And they're often have a very close relationship with the economic development part of the local government. They have a very close relationship with a local tourism board, because all of these things are interwoven. One of the tragedies of the pandemic has been just how hard hit small businesses have been. What hasn't gotten a lot of attention is that local chambers of commerce have also been really, really hard hit. And it makes sense when you think about it from when you step back and try not to be emotional about it. One of the first things that businesses did when it was clear that there was going to be an economic crisis was they cut discretionary spending. And one of the discretionary budget items that many unfortunately removed was their local chamber. So they stopped paying membership dues, or they left the group. This left local chambers with a significant financial shortfall. And it was a real problem. Now, luckily, the PPP program has been expanded in recent months to include 501c6 organizations like local chambers. So they're eligible to get some support. But one of the most important things that any business can do is ensure that it's an active participant in the local chamber of commerce. Now, there is a tendency, and this is a global thing. It's not limited to the business community. But we're not immune to it, which is the free rider phenomenon. Because you have issues that are not specifically focused on one business, many businesses think, well, because someone else is going to take care of it. But what really matters is when we can speak collectively as one community. So it doesn't matter if you're an individual stylist, or you have a salon, or you have a chain of salons, or a chain of barbershops, or you sell products into the barbershops and the beauty parlors and the cosmetologists. You all have an interest in a growing, vibrant economy that allows everyone to get a leg up. And I would really encourage people, go look up your local chamber and join. It also is a crucial part of the information that you need to get through this. So you mentioned that you were looking in the spring at the PPP materials that we were sharing. Millions and millions of people downloaded those. We did I'll just give you one example. We did a briefing for charities, so 501c3 organizations, because we realized that there was no one really speaking to them about the PPP program and how they could apply, and they were eligible from the beginning. So we sent something out, and I think 48 hours before we offered a 30-minute briefing, we had 6,000 people show up and I think we got 1,200 questions in half an hour. Now, we didn't answer 1,200, unfortunately, but there is a huge demand for information. So we've continued that over the past 13 months. Our work on the pandemic actually started last January. We arranged a coordination call, we call it. We do that typically after a natural disaster. So if there are wildfires or hurricanes,
right,
the Chamber Foundation will pull together government officials, say FEMA or other emergency managers, and then the corporate social responsibility people from companies that might want to help or might be able to help. We did that in January when it became clear that this respiratory illness in Wuhan was going to pose a problem. And we had about 2,000 companies show up for that. And we haven't stopped since. We are constantly pushing out information as the situation changes. We also have a series of educational programs that we've been doing called Path Forward. And Path Forward has received, I think we're at about 25 million views now. And that's where we bring people in to talk about, not just in the abstract, what's going on with the pandemic, but really tangible things that you as business owners or employers can do to protect yourselves, your employees, your customers, and your business. So we've had everyone from Bill and Melinda Gates and Dr. Fauci come on and talk, to an expert in healthy buildings back in June, talking about the best way to ensure the air inside your office or shop is clean. We're going to do another one. We did one a few weeks ago on disease X, because we're also really concerned that, or worried that we might forget the lessons of this pandemic.
Right.
We don't want to ever repeat this.
Exactly.
As a nurse, I think you probably know, like a lot of this was preventable.
Right. Well, and as I've been saying, people would early on say to me, who would have thought this would have happened? I was like, I thought it was going to happen. You know, I've been screaming it from the rooftops. You know, we have to be better prepared. So, so to your point, I think that what I hear you saying, if I were an individual, I think cosmetologists, barbers, because they work very almost in a silo. Even in a salon, a lot of them might be booth renters. They feel, I think, a little bit isolated in terms of banding together. They feel connected to their community, but they don't feel connected to each other always. And so I see this as a vehicle where people in these important, and you know, that's another thing, they bring to the table something that some other businesses might not bring. Not only do they understand what's going on in their world, but they're hearing it every day from people who sit in their chair. So they bring this perspective to a group like the chamber of, hey, this is happening in my salon or my barber shop, but this is also what I'm hearing from people who may not participate. So it's worth them investigating. I did hear you say there's a membership fee. So just for full transparency, it's like everything else in the world. I mean, it costs something to make this go, but you get to have your voice be heard. And it sounds like there's a lot of resources that come with being a member and joining it. So now you and I met on interesting terms. You reached out to me because you're starting some programs with COVID-19 with some of the different communities that we work in. So can you share with us some of the things that you guys are doing today, some of the programs you're working on today?
Yeah. And so let me go back to two things that you just said, because I think you just said a number of really important things that I hope the audience picked up on them. One, you talked about isolation. One of the things that I think we've all learned over the course of this experience is, and it's a shared experience, is no one likes isolation.
Right.
Well, very few people. I mean, there might be a few people who are really enjoying it, but most of us don't. So I understand the situation that folks who might feel isolated because of the nature of their work or their business arrangements. But what we've also learned is that this is a tremendous opportunity for leaders to step up. We've seen over the past year a real demand across the country for people at the community level who are willing to step up and just help. I'll use vaccines as an example. One thing that doesn't get enough attention, and we just published a blog posting on this, and we'll probably do more, is the vaccination process does not work without volunteers. I'm a volunteer in my community, and I get probably 5 or 6 emails a day asking for people to come help at the vaccination site, asking for people to help at the testing site. I think that, you know, one of the takeaways that we should all have from this, and I would encourage the nation's barbers and hairstylists and cosmetologists and beauticians and others to think not how can I help someone else, but just how can I step forward and lead? Because there is a need for leadership. And it's especially important with the other thing that you mentioned, which is hearing from people. I'm a big believer that the business community has played a crucial role in the response to this crisis. if you've been paying attention to the details, it is impossible to imagine a situation in which we are where we are today in terms of the nation's response to the pandemic without the business community.
Mm-hmm.
The testing has been driven by the business community's innovation. The vaccines were developed in record speed without sacrificing any of the standards. So we have safe and effective vaccines that were developed in record speed without any changes to the underlying standards for the safety or efficacy of the vaccine. That's a huge deal. We have millions of vaccines that are being distributed across the country by private industry. So all of these things are happening because of leaders at the local level and at the national level in the business community. So what are we doing? Well, I'll also mention something else. Yeah, the local chambers charge membership fees. And I'll be honest, I don't know, I'm sure they range. We don't charge anything for the materials I'm talking about. You can go to uschamberfoundation.org and you can take anything that we've produced and you could cut our logo off with a pair of scissors or delete it or put your logo over it and use it. You can go to committorecovery.com or uschamber.com/vaccines and get access to all kinds of stuff. One of the, there's so much material out there about COVID-19 that one of the things that we're doing is going out and looking at it so you don't have to. So we have a digital resource hub at uschamber.com/vaccines that has all of the best stuff. And we go to big companies, and I say this probably 10 times a day to big companies, and I say, so not everyone has the resources you do. Do you have anything that you'd be willing to share that they can use or learn from? And they do. Mm-hmm. So we're making that stuff available, and we're constantly trying to stay on top of this. We're also talking to small businesses in particular about the role that they play. We spend a lot of folks think about big business and they're like, oh, well, big business can do this and big business can do that. Most Americans work for smaller enterprises. And it's the smaller enterprises that are going to ensure that every American who needs a vaccine gets a vaccine. So we worked with the White House and with other business groups to launch something we call the Rally for Recovery. And we ask employers of any size to go to committorecovery.com and fill out a simple form that really makes 3 commitments. 1, we're going to promote public health measures, things like masks that will help prevent transmission of the virus. 2, we're going to make it really easy for our workers to get vaccinated. If we can, we'll give them paid time off. If we can, we'll tell the town or county we'll host a vaccination clinic at our worksite. And 3rd, we'll educate our employees and the public about all of the public health recommendations that it takes for all of us to stay safe. This is not a one-person solution. This is not a one-business solution. We need every employer, we need every business person, whether it's a sole proprietor or the CEO of a multinational corporation, to lead by example. We commissioned research, for example, and we said, our starting point was CDC and others are doing research to see what messages about vaccines work, but they're doing it from a public health standpoint. So if Leslie shows up as a nurse and says, this is good for your health, okay, I'm going to listen to Leslie, right? If Mike shows up, who doesn't know anything about medicine, and says, this is good for your health, you're like, well, I work for you, but what do you know about health? So I'm not going to listen to that. What we found in this message research we commissioned, we did it from the perspective of employees. We said, if your employer said this, or this, which would make you more likely to get a vaccine? And the thing that won in every demographic group, didn't matter whether you're young or old, white or black, factory worker, office worker, big business, little business, the thing that resonated the most was leading by example. So if you are the owner of a small business and you tell your employees that you plan to get the shot at the earliest opportunity, you can help encourage them just by doing that. If you talk to your customers and say, I'm going to get the shot, or I got the shot, and you know what? My arm hurt a little, but it was worth it. You're going to overcome some of the conspiracy theories. You're going to overcome some of the hesitation that people have. And we could talk about that, for hours, but Bill Gates is not putting a microchip in you. You're not going to get another disease or COVID-19 from getting the vaccine. This is a safe and effective vaccine. I've gotten the shot and I feel great.
I do think that that points out, whether it's talking about this vaccine or anything down the road, the power that the people in our audience actually have in their communities. People do listen. And we had a really great experience with hosting a domestic violence training where we educated whoever wanted to come to our website and understand about domestic violence, because obviously during the pandemic, that really was a significant issue. How do you recognize it? What are the resources in your community? And the ability and the empowerment it gave barbers, cosmetologists to know what to look for, maybe what to say, what advice to offer, really spoke to their power in their own small business, right? Their own ability to influence. Their circle of influence, as I would call it, is huge, right? And in some communities, it's one of the biggest influencers, what is said in that place of business. And so I do appreciate that, you're bringing that to light, that it doesn't really matter whether you are the CEO of, I don't know, Apple, or if you are the owner of the barbershop on the corner. You have a circle of influence, and whether you believe in something or not, whatever you say, people are going to listen to. And so listening to, getting all the facts, making a good decision, and then sharing that decision with others, I think is really vitally important. And, beyond the fact that joining their local chamber can help them have a voice going forward on important business things that affect them. Also, the other thing I heard you saying that I think is important is a lot of times we don't ask questions. Like when I said PPP, all the letters. When I said PPP, I know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to guess that some people in our audience were like, I still don't know what that is. I keep hearing people say it. I don't know what it is. And I think that that is the other thing that you offer to, if I go to school to be a nurse or I go to school to be a cosmetologist, whatever that is, sometimes I don't get that business education that goes alongside it. And so I don't learn about issues like taxation and things that are important to my business. And I do think that the chamber, even if you're not a member, to your point, has information that helps me be just a better business person, regardless of whether I ever voice my opinion. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. And right now, I think, the definition of being a good business person starts with protecting yourself and your employees and your customers. And then it involves protecting your business. And to do both of those, I think you have to really understand the situation. You do not have to be an epidemiologist. I know we've all turned into armchair public health experts over the past year, but you don't have to be. But what you do need to know is some of the basics and who to trust. We've lost something in recent years where we become so distrustful. And I'm convinced that it's at the core of what the next big challenge is going to be. We are on the cusp of having enough vaccines to vaccinate every American. But the bigger question is, will enough Americans be willing to accept the vaccine? As we look toward, a time when we don't need to have harsh occupancy restrictions that limit the ability of businesses to operate, when we don't have to have everyone working from home, that's a whole nother part of this. And we could do a whole conversation just on what the long-term implications of the pandemic are going to be on small businesses in urban centers. Mm-hmm. I heard, just around our office, dozens of businesses have closed. And that's because, no one's been there. I used to go get a haircut not far from my office. I haven't been there in a year. And I'm sure, that those folks are struggling. But that's going to continue. Maybe not as pronounced, but we need to make sure that we get people vaccinated so that we can get the economy going, because getting the economy going is what prevents the economic crisis from getting worse.
Okay. Well, I feel better educated. I felt like I knew what the Chamber of Commerce did, but I did not apparently know all of the details about it. So we will be posting this up to our website and encouraging our viewers to ask you questions. And we maybe, we'll share those questions with you, and then we'll post some of those answers on our website. We certainly will put all of the website information for your foundation so people can go and check it out, and sort of see what is available to them, and, maybe take that step to join their Chamber of Commerce. Anything else you want to say before we finish?
Well, I'll make an offer to you, Leslie.
All right.
If you think that it would be beneficial, we'd be happy to work with you to organize a town hall of the nation's barbers and beauticians to talk about how they can become ambassadors for the recovery, how they can take action at the community level. And we could, take some of the really smart people that we've been hearing from and let them talk to, your audience about specific concrete things that they can do to protect themselves, their loved ones, and their communities.
I think that would be fabulous. My experience throughout this has been, really overwhelming that this community, stylists and barbers, they want to have the right information to give to pass on to the people who sit in their chair and beyond. That reach of who sits in my chair, but what information do I take home? They want the right information. They want to be able to ask the blunt question, what about this? What about that? And so I think this group of people are great at leading, to your point, but I think sometimes they feel a little nervous that they maybe don't have the right information. So if we had a town hall where they were able to ask those questions of all the right people, and also people that I think we all think only talk to the CEOs of big companies, right? If I can get someone who I trust to talk to me, as, the stylist on the corner or the barber on the corner, I think that is meaningful to this community. So we would love to host it with you and try to get our community engaged.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate your time, and it sounds like we'll be talking to each other again.
All right. Thank you.